Ready? Okay, so we're going to do easy explanation of sacrum. So I'm going to actually put you behind me.
Okay.
Okay, so if I tell you there's a right seated flexion test, the first thing you're going to do is put up your right hand in this position. That means that this is now your axis, this is the rest of your sacrum. So this is a left axis. I then tell you that the sacral, if there's a negative spring test, something had to have moved forward, and we always pivot around the axes. So it's going to be turned this way, which would make you give a left on left sacral torsion.
Okay.
Now, if I said the sphinx test or spring test was positive, that means something had to have moved backwards, and then we would have turned this way. You now have a right facing sacral torsion on a left axis, because the axis points up to the person's left. And that's for the sacral torsions. I pretty much always assume a sacral torsion unless proven otherwise. So you'd know that it was a sacral torsion. This is anterior, this is posterior. Since I know how I moved my hand, this is also posterior, and this is anterior. You just kind of go on how your hand actually looks when you do that motion. And that's what your findings will be for those 4 points. Again, so a forward torsion or a left on left in this case, this would be posterior, this would be posterior, this is anterior, this is anterior. If those don't match up, something flexed. There's only, like, it's split half and half. You either have half unilateral sacral torsion or sacral flexion or a unilateral sacral extension. So kind of go like this. But if they match up anterior, anterior, posterior, posterior, it's going to be a torsion. Now you just have to figure out which one it is. If those don't line up, you figure out again, is it positive on the right? If it's positive on the right, then it's something happened on the right side. If the sphinx test is positive, then something had to have moved backwards. That's always the rule, something moved backwards. So this is now you came back, which means it's a unilateral sacral extension. If the sphinx or spring test is negative, something moved forward, and so now you have unilateral sacral flexion. And the torsion rules hold up on both sides, so if I said it's positive on the left, I throw out my left hand. This is now my axis, which makes it a right axis. I turn my hand towards, if it's, again, we go with, is it positive or negative sphinx? If it's negative sphinx, I turn that way because something had to have moved forward, and we always pivot around the axis. So we now have a right facing, because my hand faces right, on a right axis torsion. Again, the findings for that are going to be
Posterior, posterior,
because that's how my hand looks, and
anterior, anterior.
If it is, you look at it and go, okay, the sphinx test is negative, that means something, or positive, that means something had to have moved backwards, so I turn my hand like this, and I now have a left-facing sacral torsion on a right axis. And this is really the easy way to do it. So then we have posterior, posterior, anterior, anterior for our sacral findings. And again, the unilaterals are going to be the exact same. If it's positive on the left side is the screwed up side on your seated flexion. If the spring test is negative, it moved forward, we have flexion. If it moved backwards, we have an extension.